As the night falls and the darkness creeps in, the world around us changes. Shadows seem to grow longer and the silence becomes deafening. But what happens when the silence is broken by the sound of footsteps that don't belong to anyone you know? What happens when you hear a whisper in your ear but there's no one there? Welcome to our world of horror, where the unknown is the only certainty and fear is the only emotion. Brace yourself, because the journey we're about to take is not for the faint of heart. The small town of Rockfield was quiet on Halloween night, with most people staying at home, passing out candy to trick-or-treaters or watching scary movies. But for Alex, Bella, Chris, Danny, and Emma, the night was too dull. They had grown up in Rockfield and knew that there was nothing to do in the town on Halloween. After some discussion, the group decided to explore the abandoned mine on the outskirts of town. It had been closed for years, and the entrance was boarded up, but that only made it more appealing to the adventurous group. As they walked towards the entrance, they noticed that the air around the mine seemed to be colder than it should have been. The closer they got to the entrance, the more intense the cold became. The feeling was unsettling, but the group brushed it off, excited for the adventure that lay ahead. When they arrived at the entrance, they found that it was barricaded with boards and rusty chains. But they were determined to explore the mine, so they climbed over the barrier and made their way inside. The mine was dark and silent, with only their footsteps echoing through the tunnels. They took out their flashlights and started exploring, finding old mining equipment, carts, and abandoned tools along the way. As they made their way deeper into the mine, they started to see strange symbols etched into the walls. They couldn't make out what they meant, but they seemed to be some kind of warning. Despite the eerie atmosphere, the group continued to explore, convinced that it was just an old mine with some spooky legends attached to it. As they explored, they heard strange noises, creaking sounds, footsteps, and whispers. At first, they thought it was just the old mine settling, but the sounds continued to grow louder and more frequent. The group's excitement turned to unease as they realized that something was off. But they pressed on, determined to see what lay ahead. As they turned a corner, they saw something that made their blood run cold. A ghostly figure was floating in the air, watching them with hollow eyes. The figure seemed to be made of mist, and it gave off an eerie, otherworldly glow. The group tried to run, but they found themselves trapped in the mine. The entrance had been blocked by a pile of rocks and debris, and there was no way out. Panic set in as they realized that they were completely alone, trapped in a dark mine with no food, water, or phone signal. As the night wore on, the group huddled together, trying to stay calm as they heard strange noises all around them. They realized that they were not alone in the mine. There was something else with them, something malevolent and vengeful. The group tried to keep their spirits up, talking to each other and telling ghost stories to distract themselves from the haunting around them. But as the night wore on, they grew increasingly anxious, realizing that they might never make it out of the mine alive. Despite the fear that gripped them, they knew that they had to find a way out. They searched the mine for any sign of a way out, but the passages seemed to stretch on forever, with no end in sight. As the first light of dawn began to filter into the mine, the group's spirits lifted. They knew that they had survived the night, and they were determined to find a way out of the mine and back to the safety of their homes. Little did they know, the worst was yet to come. The group was restless as they sat in the mine, waiting for daylight to arrive. They had been trapped for hours, with no sign of rescue or escape. The only sounds were the echoes of their own breathing and the occasional drip of water. Bella's nerves were frayed, and she was the first to break the silence. "What the hell was that thing?" she asked, her voice shaking. "That ghostly figure we saw. Was it real?" Chris tried to reassure her. "It was probably just our imagination," he said. "We were all freaked out from exploring the mine. We imagined we saw something." But Emma was less convinced. "I don't know," she said, her voice low. "There were those symbols on the walls, and that figure was too real to be just in our heads." Danny shivered. "I don't want to think about it," he said. "Let's just focus on getting out of here." The group decided to explore the mine some more, hoping to find a way out. But as they walked, they heard strange sounds echoing through the tunnel's whispers, moans, and shuffling sounds seemed to be coming from all around them. As they turned a corner, they saw another ghostly figure, this one more solid than the last. It was a man in old mining gear, staring at them with empty eye sockets. The group froze, unsure of what to do. The figure didn't move, but the air around it seemed to grow colder and colder. Chris stepped forward, his flashlight shaking. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice trembling. But the figure didn't answer. It just stood there, watching them with an eerie calmness. The group realized that they were in serious danger. As they turned to run, they heard the sound of shuffling footsteps behind them. They ran as fast as they could, their hearts pounding in their chests. They could hear the figure behind them, its breath hot on their necks. Finally, they reached a dead end. There was nowhere to go, and they knew they were trapped. The figure loomed over them, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. Suddenly, the walls began to shake, and rocks tumbled from the ceiling. The group covered their heads, bracing for impact. When the shaking stopped, they found themselves in a new section of the mine, one they had never seen before. The air was thick with dust, and the walls were covered in strange symbols. The group realized that they had stumbled upon something ancient and powerful, something that had been hidden away for centuries. But they had no time to investigate. The ghostly figure was still following them, its presence growing stronger with each passing moment. They knew that they had to find a way out of the mine, and fast. As they ran through the winding tunnels, they heard the sound of rushing water. They followed the sound and found themselves in a cavern, with a rushing river flowing through the middle of it. It was their only chance. They jumped into the icy water, letting it carry them downstream. They emerged from the mine, shivering and soaked, but alive. As they stumbled back into town, they realized that they had been lucky to survive. The haunted mine was not a place to be trifled with, and they had narrowly escaped with their lives. But the memory of the ghostly figures and the ancient symbols would haunt them for years to come. They knew that they had witnessed something otherworldly, something beyond explanation. And they knew that they would never forget the horror of the haunted mine. After their harrowing experience in the haunted mine, the 5 friends tried to put it behind them. They told themselves that it was just a spooky Halloween adventure that had gone too far. But as the days passed, they began to realize that something was very wrong. Chris was the first to notice something odd. He had been having strange dreams of the ghostly figure they had seen in the mine. In his dreams, the figure would beckon him deeper into the tunnels, its voice echoing in his head. Bella, too, was having nightmares. She dreamt of the symbols they had seen on the walls of the mine, and of strange, otherworldly creatures lurking in the shadows. She woke up in a cold sweat, unable to shake the feeling that something was watching her. Danny was also feeling uneasy. He had developed a persistent cough and a fever, and he couldn't seem to shake them. Emma, too, was feeling ill, with a constant headache that refused to go away. As they compared notes, the group realized that they were all experiencing strange symptoms that seemed to be getting worse every day. They began to wonder if something had followed them out of the mine, something that was now haunting them. Desperate for answers, they began to research the history of the mine. What they found was shocking. The mine had been the site of several accidents and disasters over the years, with many miners losing their lives in tragic and violent ways. But it was the legend of the curse that chilled them to the bone. According to local lore, the mine was cursed by the spirits of the dead miners, who were said to haunt the tunnels and seek revenge on anyone who dared to enter their domain. The group realized that they had unwittingly unleashed something terrible when they entered the mine. They had disturbed the spirits of the dead, and now they were paying the price. As their symptoms worsened, they knew that they had to find a way to break the curse. They consulted with a local psychic, who confirmed their suspicions. The mine was indeed cursed, and they were all under its spell. The psychic suggested a ritual to break the curse, involving a mixture of herbs and incantations. The group agreed to try it, desperate for any kind of relief. They gathered in a circle, holding hands, as the psychic began the ritual. They felt a strange energy coursing through their bodies, and they heard the sound of whispers and moans echoing in the air. But as the ritual reached its climax, something went wrong. The room filled with a blinding light, and the group felt themselves being pulled apart. They screamed, but their voices were drowned out by the sound of rushing wind. When they opened their eyes, they found themselves back in the haunted mine. The ghostly figures were all around them, and the symbols on the walls seemed to be glowing with an unearthly light. They realized with horror that they had been tricked. The curse had taken them back into the mine, and now they were trapped once again. They knew that they had made a grave mistake, and that they would pay for it with their lives. As the group realized they were back in the haunted mine, fear and panic set in. They had no idea how they got there, and they were even more terrified of what was to come. The ghostly figures that they had seen before were now closer, and their eyes seemed to glow in the dark. The symbols on the walls were pulsating with an eerie light, and the air was thick with an ominous presence. They had to act fast. They knew that they had to find a way out of the mine and break the curse once and for all. But the question was, how? They retraced their steps and tried to remember the path they had taken before. But everything seemed different. The tunnels were shifting and changing. leading them to dead ends and blocked passages. They were lost, and time was running out. As they continued to wander, they heard strange noises coming from the shadows. Whispering voices and eerie laughter echoed through the tunnels. They saw movement out of the corners of their eyes, but when they turned to look, there was nothing there. The air grew colder, and they could see their breath as they huddled together for warmth. The sense of dread that had been building inside them was now overwhelming. They knew that they were not alone in the mine, and that whatever was with them was malevolent and vengeful. They soon came across a deep, dark chasm that seemed to go down forever. It was clear that they could not cross it on foot, and they had no ropes or equipment to rappel down. They were trapped. But then, they heard a faint sound coming from the other side of the chasm. It was a faint tapping noise, like someone was trying to communicate with them. They couldn't make out what it was saying, but they knew that they had to investigate. They carefully made their way around the edge of the chasm, trying to find a way to cross. As they got closer to the source of the sound, they realized that it was coming from a group of trapped miners who had been lost in the mine for years. The miners told them of a way out, but warned them that the curse had taken hold of the mine, and that they would have to fight their way out. They handed them a map of the mine, and showed them the path they must take. The group set out on the path, but they were soon met with resistance. The ghostly figures that had been haunting them before now appeared to be more aggressive, and they were hurling rocks and debris at them. The symbols on the walls were glowing brighter, and the air was thick with a strange energy. They fought their way through the mine, their senses heightened, and their adrenaline pumping. They knew that they had to break the curse and escape the mine before it was too late. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they saw a light at the end of the tunnel. They stumbled towards it, gasping for air, and their hearts pounding with relief. They had made it out of the mine alive. As they emerged into the daylight, they fell to the ground, exhausted, and gasping for air. They looked back at the mine, which seemed to be pulsing with an unearthly light. They knew that they had survived, but they would never be the same again. They had come face to face with the supernatural, and it had left a mark on their souls that would never fade. The group stumbled out of the haunted mine, their bodies battered and bruised, their minds traumatized. They sat on the ground, staring at the entrance of the mine in shock and disbelief. They had been through a harrowing experience, and they were lucky to be alive. As they sat there, they began to reflect on what had happened. They tried to piece together what had gone wrong, how they had become trapped in the mine, and how they had managed to escape. But the more they thought about it, the more confused they became. They decided to go to the authorities and report what had happened. They knew that the mine was dangerous, and that no one should ever go inside. They also wanted to make sure that no one else would fall victim to the curse that had haunted them. When they arrived at the police station, they were met with skepticism. The officers thought that they were just a group of kids playing a prank, and that they were wasting their time. But as they began to tell their story, the officers began to take notice. They could see the fear in their eyes, and the desperation in their voices. The group was questioned for hours, and they were asked to draw a map of the mine, and to describe in detail the symbols that they had seen on the walls. The police took their story seriously, and they sent a team of officers to investigate the mine. The officers found the entrance to the mine, but when they tried to go inside, they were met with resistance. The same ghostly figures that had haunted the group before were now blocking their way. They tried to communicate with them, but they received no response. They soon realized that the mine was still cursed, and that it was best to stay away. The group of friends were hailed as heroes, and their story made headlines across the country. People were shocked and fascinated by their tale of survival, and many began to speculate about the supernatural forces that had taken hold of the mine. The group had a hard time adjusting to life after the incident. They had nightmares and flashbacks of their time in the mine, and they were haunted by the memory of the ghostly figures that had chased them. They knew that they had to find a way to move on, but it was easier said than done. They decided to seek therapy, and they talked to a counselor about their experiences. They found comfort in each other's company, and they formed a bond that could never be broken. They knew that they had gone through something extraordinary, and that they had survived it together. Years went by, and the group grew up and went their separate ways. They went to college, got jobs, and started families. But they never forgot about the haunted mine and the horrors that they had faced. They often talked about it, and they would occasionally visit the entrance of the mine, just to see if anything had changed. But it remained the same, a dark and ominous portal to a world that they had left behind. In the end, they came to the realization that the mine had been cursed for a reason. It was a warning, a reminder that there are forces in the universe that are beyond our understanding. And that sometimes, the only thing we can do is hold on to each other and fight for survival.